Some teachers are embracing it more than others. Others are very hesitant and kind of reluctant. But I think a thing to kind of understand too is like this technology is not going back in the box. More and more employers are saying that they're not hiring anyone that's not AI ready. And what does it mean to be AI ready? How do you put that on your resume? So I think understanding what the limitations are of the tool and then actually starting to see how it can actually be value added to your classroom versus this competition is a good starting point because, we have to start teaching these tools and we need to start delivering on that if we're going to stay relevant in the game.
Welcome to SkarrCast, the podcast from SkarrNet Training Systems, where we talk about how to human better in the age of AI. We're exploring what it really means to learn for tomorrow instead of teaching to the past. I'm Ben Henry, and with me today is the founder and CEO of SkarrNet, a community college professor, Navy and Air Force veteran, and cybersecurity innovator who spent his career rethinking how people work and learn stuff. So Dennis Skarr, kick us off.
Thanks, Ben. At SkarrNet, we believe AI should amplify people, not replace them. Learning can feel like exploration again, not compliance. Technology should expand what humans can imagine, not keeping us trapped within these legacy systems. It's time to move on from this legacy concept of the web, an internet built for searching, not for guiding. It's now time for more curiosity, asking better and more questions, exploring new ideas, and leveraging AI as your learning partner in this process. At SkarrNet, our mission is simple: to help students, teachers, and professionals unlock their creative potential through an AI-driven learning experience that challenge, inspire, and evolve with them. Because the future of learning isn't artificial. It's amplified by curiosity and grounded in humanity. That's what human better means.
Thanks, Dennis. It's like so exciting to be living on the cutting edge of this, right? I'm also excited to introduce some of the thinkers shaping that next model. So welcome to Tara Bonhorst, our learning design architect and founder of Do That Dave, turning courses into creation labs. And welcome to Kat Santana of the Catalyst Tapestry. Catalyst, I like it. Our workforce strategist and systems builder, connecting what we teach to how people actually earn, grow, and build careers. And I'm Ben Henry with Light Air Media, the storytelling partner helping to make this vision visible to the world. So together, we are the core SkarrNet team. And today we're talking about the future of learning, how to teach forward and not backward. So let's unpack what Dennis said about rethinking how we learn. What does it actually mean to flip the model? Tara, let's start with you. What's changing about how we design learning itself?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of concern right now, I think, about the impacts of AI on education and on the job training, because so much of our curriculum across all these areas is focused really on memorizing and remembering facts. Then you answer some multiple choice questions to prove you understand. Maybe you write an essay. But these are all things that AI can really easily do now. But the real uncomfortable truth here isn't that students are going to use AI to cheat. It's that so many courses are designed for passive consumption, and they're easy to game with AI. They don't go beyond this basic kind of recall and understanding and really drive any higher order thinking. But I think there's good news here too. This is our moment to completely rethink how we teach and learn. If AI can just kind of breeze through these basic e-learning courses that we have, I think that's really solid proof that those kind of learning experiences aren't really enough to drive meaningful learning outcomes. We need to build learning experiences that demand engagement and spark curiosity and actually change behavior. So let's talk about how that might look. So I want to show you guys this is a very common framework that professional learning designers use to organize and scaffold learning objectives when they're creating new curriculum. This is Bloom's taxonomy. It's typically structured as a pyramid like this. At the base, we've got remembering and understanding. This is where learners can recall facts, explain basic concepts. Then above that, you get to application. You're using knowledge and skills in a real world context. Then analyzing, breaking things down, comparing, contrasting, finding patterns. And then we hit evaluation where we're actually judging quality and accuracy. And at the very top, we have creation, producing something that's entirely new. So traditionally, we've assumed that learners need a solid foundation at the bottom before they can move up, which makes sense in theory. But really, in practice, most learning experiences never actually get past that base. They focus on reading, watching, memorizing, a lot of really passive learning. So sometimes as learning designers, we get the chance to include some hands-on projects or scenario-based activities that kind of brush up against application and analysis. But even those tasks can be outsourced to AI now. So if the content at these levels is really easy to game with AI, we need to dramatically rethink our strategies. So what if instead we reimagined Bloom's taxonomy and flipped it entirely upside down? So this idea of an inverted Bloom's isn't new, but it's become far more attainable now with AI. So if learners can use AI to create quickly, why not just start there? We can have our learners create something right away, even when they don't understand fully the topic yet. And then from there, we guide them as they evaluate their AI-assisted output, analyze it, compare it with trusted sources, and then connect it to their own lives and work. And by the time they work their way up to understanding and remembering, the knowledge sticks because they've actively engaged with it. So I'll give you a quick example here. Let's say we want to teach learners about the Declaration of Independence. So, when I was in school, we had to memorize that and then recite it in front of the whole class. But maybe instead of starting there, we could actually ask students to create their own Declaration of Independence with some help from AI. And then they can evaluate it. What's strong? What's missing? And then next, they actually analyze the original document and compare it to their own. And then they can apply those ideas to their own lives and their communities. And then by the time they understand the historical context and remember dates and names, the knowledge is actually grounded in meaningful experience. If you've written your own Declaration of Independence, it makes it a lot easier to remember that the original was signed in 1776, right? So I really see AI as kind of pushing us towards building more meaningful learning experiences, and it's giving us the tools to do it, which I think is great for the future of education and training. And, we know that at least some of our learners are already using AI to game these kind of passive courses. And that's why I'm such a firm believer in this inverted Bloom's approach. We can start with creation, guide learners through evaluation, analysis, and application, and move beyond just content delivery to true active learning.
Thank you, Tara. That was really amazing. I've been teaching professionally within the education system for 10 years. And the first time Bloom was introduced to me was day one of how to be a teacher. And I found that extremely helpful just to actually kind of frame things out for my classes. And every quarter as I kind of go through and update things, whether I'm building training for my classrooms or, something on the side that's less formal, Bloom's is really at the heart and soul of everything. And I think it's just so easy to use that I've become comfortable with that. And to see it flipped upside down on me, made me a little bit uncomfortable, where I'm like, hey, what are you doing with this tool that's very, very helpful for me and I use it for like building off of all my assignments for students, and I found it really interesting. And I love the idea to kind of create first. One of the my favorite things to create in my classes are like those meaningful experiences, like creating PowerPoint slides, blah, but creating those meaningful learning experiences that I would traditionally take from my military assignments, and kind of like we'd do an assessment, and then I'd come back and I had all these lessons learned, things I learned on the job, things that were there, and how do I apply them? And at that point, I was the learner and I was creating things. And I really would have liked a tool like AI to help me with these things. But when I think of like taking that experience that I had, where I was doing something and then kind of applying that to a learning lesson and kind of creating that out, I see a lot of value in like recycling that for our students with the model that you just kind of proposed. And I know that like, especially in the classroom, the engagement piece that's been really hard to tap into since we kind of came back from COVID and had to go back online, like that engagement, that connection, that piece is hard. But when I have students building or creating different things versus like researching and kind of like gathering information, I really see a lot more excitement and ultimately like a better product at the end. So, are there some examples that you've observed as well, like with this model? You've been kind of talking about this. You've given presentations on it. What feedback have you kind of got from people that have actually tried out this model?
Yeah, actually, I've been doing this in my workshops that I've been doing with other learning designers, and we have folks kind of come in and use AI tools to help them design new learning experiences. Sorry, this is going to get a little meta here. We're talking about using AI for learning design to, but so, it's really impactful to let people loose and have them create something really quickly. I did a workshop not that long ago where we had the participants would do a really quick needs analysis, which is something that learning designers do ideally before they start designing curriculum. And I think just seeing how quickly, it could work was a real eye-opener for people. But then also, you could see how they brought their own expertise in right away to say, well, this part's really shallow, this part's not right, this part's not accurate. So they got really far right away, really far, really fast, but then we're able to, bring in their own knowledge and refine it and find the weaknesses and spot the gaps. So.
Thanks, Tara and Dennis. I always love me a good pyramid chart. So, I mean, I just love how we can take the theoretical and then hear from Dennis, who can draw on your experience in a college classroom. So the concept here is kind of like flipping the classroom and flipping the taxonomy at the same time. So basically starting with the doing and then letting the learning sort of catch up after that. Kat, how does this play out sort of post-classroom, like in the workforce?
Yeah, so the big statement is like the future of work is not going to care about whether or not you have memorized a bunch of stuff. It's really about how fast can you adapt to what we have in our world for tools and ways to learn and better ourselves and be more efficient, right? And the employers that we talk to all the time are really starting to recognize that creativity often outweighs credentials. And so if you have somebody coming in with the just with their mind ready to just absorb, take in what is happening, it could be an issue that an organization has had for many years, and and folks who've been there for years who are that we've always done it this way, this is the way we've always done it, is the best. And we can set that, I see that pyramid in my head. We can just turn that completely upside down when you have somebody who can come in with creativity and wonderful questions, and having a tool like AI as a thought partner to build crosswalks and examine how things have always been with wonderful data, look at it and just start reimagining how things can be done better. And I really love this, especially with applications where we start developing, obviously, workforce in our higher education, but even post-secondary, where we have young people that are the most creative, and then we send them to, off to college, and then they learn and memorize and do all these things, and their creativity is not the focal point. And so to me, it kind of feels like we're delaying that creativity space that could be used so much more readily in employment spaces. And also entrepreneurism, which is a huge passion of mine. Like, how do we get folks thinking about what they can create that would be a sustainable future for themselves? And entrepreneurs are creative. Here we are, all of us entrepreneurs, very creative, and have passion. And so that fuels what we want to do, what we choose to do with our time, and how we make money and impact the world.
Thanks, Kat. So if AI can handle the boring parts of learning, what becomes the human edge of that? Dennis, where does the tension live between the old way of learning and the future?
Yeah. So, I'll challenge a little bit. I'll say the old way is boring, but I think this new way is very exciting. And, the fundamentals of how we learn are tried and true and very tested. And I think a lot of the challenges we kind of have right now as educators is how the transfer of knowledge happened in the past is, I'm a subject matter expert, or one of us is a subject matter expert, and we're trying to transfer what's actually up here in our brain to students' brains, like one to many. I got 24 students. I got to get what's out of here into the skulls of 24 people, like on the other side of the podium. And we have different tools and methodologies in order to do that, and I think some of the challenges that we've had to kind of like transfer that knowledge is just they're a little dated, they're static, and they're flat. And now along comes this disruptor tool or AI, where essentially I can go into my pocket and ask questions about whatever it is that I need to kind of have answered. And there's still a great deal of fact checking that needs to happen in there. But the technology is getting better, faster and faster each and every year. And I'm absolutely floored with how fast this technology is moving. So I think there's, the way that we were doing things in academia was working really, really well. But I think as educators, we need to start looking at how we can incorporate these new tools to help out with our learning. And looking at creative ways of let's start with create first within Bloom's. Students absolutely, truly love to create things. And as an educator, I'm like, usually the project is the last thing we do, and that's in week 9, week 10 of the training in a quarter-based system. And students kind of got to go through the other kind of it's almost ritualistic type of exercises in order to kind of get to the big capstone exercise that's previewed on week 1. And they can't wait to kind of get to it and use that as like this little carrot to kind of keep them keep them engaged over the quarter. But if I can start off with like creating day 1 and actually have them lean on this tool that, helps them understand things that they're going to learn through week 1 through 9, and start with just like with creation and build something and learn how this tool can actually assist them and be them more effective and fill in the knowledge gaps that they currently don't have. And then we use that to get them engaged and excited, and then kind of like go through like, okay, this is what you created. Now let's understand this and kind of like understand how it works. I think that's a really kind of new way of learning and experimenting with like how we can actually produce some different educational products out there. And I think, that's just kind of like one example just that came off the top of my head with this. But I think one of the cool things about AI is, we can try these different ideas out, and kind of like walk through these different chats and get feedback from instructors and kind of like push the envelope with everything. And they're really kind of worth exploring, and give us new tools. And, to kind of Kat's point there with the workforce, more and more employers are looking at like, well, hey, if you actually have this tool with our knowledge set of, whatever technology they need to use or any sort of policies already kind of canned, ready in this box, it's not about what they come into that job knowing, it's what can they do with this new tool to make them effective and do these other different things. So, in addition to blooms being flipped upside down as one concept, we're also looking at that workforce pipeline. Like, does entry-level worker become a mid-level worker? And all these different questions are being asked and thought about. And I think this really kind of opens up a lot of different discussions on how we can kind of incorporate these tools.
I appreciate you calling out, or at least alluding to, you go to school, you get your education, and it doesn't matter how high it is it could be 4-year education. You're going to start at entry level because you haven't applied that yet, right? And so as a workforce development experience, that system used to invest a lot of money into paying for education. And then, with goals of putting folks in spaces where, they have a sustainable family sustaining wage when they get out and they graduate with their degrees into these jobs, and then having to start entry level. So the workforce system decided the investment was actually getting internships and pre-apprenticeships and those sorts of work-based learnings available, because it's that hands-on applied knowledge, right, that is actually quite valuable. It shows an employer what you can do. And I think with the tools that we have available, and using these tools alongside, like you said, enhancing education with it and using it for creativity and exploration. But what the individual can do with that, especially if they have an employer in mind that they would like to work for, going in and doing that wonderful research to find out, what is culture, what is the most valuable skills, soft skills, hard skills, and doing that their own research on how they show up as the most employable for that particular employer.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. Like, I really appreciate you mentioned that element of like experience and what employers are looking for in that entry level job. Because, as an educator, I go to conferences, I do networking, I talk with professionals within our industry advisory board, and consistently, I always hear experience. They need to do something, but within a classroom, you're kind of limited to what you need to cover over the period of time. You can sneak in some cool capstone project if you got the time and resources to develop one. But where I've really been successful with actually kind of like smithing out that experience is within the clubs. So the clubs, I feel like, where students can kind of free range and almost explore. And this is where a tool like AI could be really valuable, because students have this idea, this vision. They want to create something. They want to do this project. They'll translate to something on their resume that an employer will look at and be like, wow, this is really exciting. Tell me more about this. And that's something that I actually try and actually weave into the clubs is like, let's build something that will be impressive for your employer as well as something kind of fun. And, 4 years ago, there was a lot of like hand holding, I hate to use that term, but like more teaching, as a club advisor, like, oh, I want to do this. Okay, how do you do that? And it was more of a pseudo teaching role. But now I could just offload it and be like, all right, this is your project. Like, let's roll with it. Let's build some AI tools on how to actually propel you there. And the students who have actually kind of gravitated towards that approach are absolutely like punching above their weight. Students who are incorporating that are performing well and above where they should be within that kind of academic pipeline where they are. So, for example, I have one student where he's actually an official ICS Village intern right now, and he's working for a national level nonprofit on industrial cybersecurity, and he has a hands-on cybersecurity training product that they created for him. And within this device, there's all these different technical products out there, like a networking switch, a human machine interface, a programmable logic controller, and they all need to talk. Each one of those devices has like a 20 to 30,000 page manual for each product. And it's like, here, go. So we shoved all those product documents into one AI project, and he can ask his AI, like, how do I actually, I want to do X. How do I do that? And the AI will actually go through all the different documents and kind of figure out how to do that. And it's been effective for him to actually propel himself into this project. Could he have done it on his own? Yeah, he could control F all the way through those PDF documents, but being a busy student who also has a family and a job and an internship, like, time is really kind of not something that a lot of students have. But he is able to actually use this tool to really kind of advance what he's doing with this skill and build on his background and his experience within this space to really create an amazing project. And his internship has been extended. He went to the DEF CON cybersecurity conference and actually, like, introduced this new trainer to hundreds of different participants at the conference. And when I talk about, like, meaningful experiences, that students can build with these different tools, landing an internship with, like, an amazing nonprofit at national level, and then being able to talk at the world's biggest, like, hacker conference in the world, the world's biggest hacker conference in the world. But that's really extraordinary. And it's getting him above his competition when it comes to getting him into an entry-level cybersecurity job. And, these tools can help propel people. They're really, really powerful fuel for getting these students that creativity amplified into something that's actually meaningful for their resume.
Yeah, now that's a story you can really tell in an interview where you've actually done something and you can demonstrate that, versus when you come out with your coursework, you can say, well, I passed my final with a 90%. No employer is going to want to hear that. They want to know what you're bringing, what you can do, what kind of experience you have. What have you done? So, what a great story.
I love those examples. It seems like AI, like, really can, like, unlock creativity in the classroom in ways that we haven't seen. But I'm curious, like, how is this tech being received in the classroom now? Like, so my partner is a middle school teacher, and there just seems to be a lot of fear among teachers and administrators in our schools around AI. Like, the tech is emerging so quickly, right? And people just don't know what to make of it. And a lot of it is like seeing AI as this threat that is a stifler of critical thinking, and or is just a way, for students to cheat on their homework or whatever. And then they end up spending all these resources to defend against AI rather than embracing it and leaning into this incredible, groundbreaking technology. So what would you say to schools who are trying to figure out what to make of all this?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Ben. Like, I respect the opinions and the style of teaching of all my other educators in this space. And I feel like it's kind of like some teachers are embracing it more than others. Others are very hesitant and kind of reluctant. And everyone's going to kind of get there on their own journey. But I think a thing to kind of understand too is, like, this technology is not going back in the box. More and more employers are saying that they're not hiring anyone that's not AI ready. And what does it mean to be AI ready? How do you put that on your resume? And students are trying to figure that out too. So there's a big disconnect between what industry is looking for as well as academia. And, I've been teaching a long time, and cheating has always been around there. I can point out every Wikipedia entry there is on entry level, like, IT security fundamental stuff. Like, the Control C, the copy and paste of, putting stuff in there has been around for a while. Students can spend $19.95 and have someone, write a paper for them. They can copy it. I mean, there's always ways to cheat. I take a different approach with it in my class because I teach technology and students leave my program wanting to get a job. So I actually have the luxury of telling students, like, if you cheat my class, that's fine. You're still probably going to get a decent grade because I don't look for it, but you're going to fail in your interview. Like you're in this space to get ahead and become something in life and be bigger than where you currently are. You don't have different opportunities. So if you're going to cheat your time and your resources and, everything here, like that's the message I kind of send on the students on day one. But I also understand other instructors, they teach within these sequences. And if one teacher doesn't kind of like deliver on that, then other teachers are kind of inheriting, that student being ready. So there are other challenges and other perspectives too, as I kind of talk in this space. But I think the one thing that, all educators need is time. Every single educator I know out there is under-resourced, stressed out over time, and really trying to actually create within their own classrooms. So my advice to the teachers that are kind of like, not quite there yet is try it out. Kind of like start asking it different questions, become proficient with the tool and actually push the boundaries of it. And then think about how you can actually apply it into your classroom and you become the learner as a teacher for a little bit. Have it teach you something that you're really familiar with, because you will see errors. It will make mistakes, but so do we as human beings. So I think understanding what the limitations are of the tool and then actually starting to see how it can actually be value added to your classroom versus this competition is a good starting point, because, we have to start teaching these tools. Employers are looking for it. They're adopting it right now. They're looking for AI readiness, AI fluency, and we need to start delivering on that if we're going to stay relevant in the game.
Yeah, Dennis, you bring up you brought up the factor of time. And, part of the issue here, I think, is that change takes time. And it's time that educators don't have, to actually, have the space to explore these tools. And instead they're, it really, these tools really do kind of call for this dramatic rethinking of how we teach. But what busy teacher has time for that? So, part of this is on, leadership in education and the administration of various institutions to give teachers the space and the tools to do this.
And we're asking our educators with this to be really vulnerable. Fear stifles a lot of growth. Vulnerability and being brave and stepping into something new is exciting, but also it's really scary. And so, I warm, fuzzy human that I am, I was thinking about why do folks go to school? Why do they go to get the educations they get? And I talked earlier about what is your passion and how you want to show up in the world and the impact that you want to have, that you want to make. Teachers want to be teachers because they want to impact people. That's what they want. And to Tara's point, when we talk about how much time it takes to do administration and those tasks, and as things change in our education system and things get heavier, especially funding going away in different spaces and increasing the workload, where's the joy left for our educators? Where's that joy in removing them from the thing, who they are, their passion, their heart that was driving them to step into a space to want to shape folks in their education and help them grow in knowledge and understanding of the world. And I think, you all know that I've played around with hope theory in this space. And with that, what builds hope is small wins, and lots of them, and you can stack them. But every small win grows hope. Right. And so if we combine hope and joy and we can put that back into education by taking some of this menial, not that it's not important, but it's just, hi, I've graded papers a lot before, right? Those types of things. How do we give the teachers back their passion? How do we put them back in that space by removing that? And also help them be creative with what they're teaching, and showing their students a wonderful tool that can help them also be really creative.
Ooh, hope theory. Ooh, I want to hear more about that. I also love the point about how we're so worried about cheating, but the incentive is there to learn and grow. And if you're as a student, and if you're cheating, you're just cheating yourself, because it doesn't matter what grade you get. What matters is when you're sitting in that interview, what are you going to be able to talk about? I love that.
I think you find a lot of the times is that students don't cheat because they want to be bad. They cheat because the content doesn't align with their needs. And it's not actually setting them up for success in down the line, in an interview, in a job, to sit there and memorize and recall when there's tools that can do it, frankly, better than than the human, than humans in a lot of cases. So, I see that, if we can present these opportunities to them to where, that's tapping into their passion and what they want to learn about, they're not going to cheat their way through that.
Yeah, and I think like as an educator, or a mentor or anything in this space, you only have so much time, and that there's a lot of students that are going to be, I should say there's a lot. I say there's hardly any students that really are like chronic cheaters. But instead of like trying to spend time catching them and kind of like correcting them in that space, I try and divert my time to the students that are curious and want to learn. And that's where I'd rather send my resources, to inspire, to build, to help those students actually achieve their goals. And I've tried this out with teaching a digital forensics class online, which for me is like the worst scenario to try and teach a class online. Digital forensics online without an instructor being there to kind of like read the classroom and see the students is like extremely difficult. So I found like actually leaning towards an AI kind of like digital assistant slash teacher's aid for that class to be used in all the hands-on activities was extremely powerful. Students who were struggling with that material. And I had one student actually begin with that. And like, he would see me every week. He came to the clubs. He's like, dude, I'm learning so much off of this. Like, I'm going way beyond what's in my paper textbook in these labs, because as he's learning these different tools, he's just leaning into AI. What else can this do? What else can this do? What else can this do? And he was actually like free ranging within this lab environment. But, the labs would, walk him through, do this, click that, do this. And he's kind of like fuzzy with that, but he would fill in what he didn't know by asking AI because he found it faster than a textbook versus like flipping through and trying to find it. And then he was going well beyond each and every one of the tools in that exercise. And he learned more in that class by having access to this technology than I could have provided being in person to him in a classroom of 24. He had a teacher's assistant right there in his pocket at 2 a.m. when he worked. I'm sleeping. He is in his work mode and he was crushing it. And his level of proficiency with AI progressed over the year. And then I had him in person with, in my classroom, and we were doing like, this comparing and contrasting between two niche areas of IT, and the students that were actually building that level of proficiency with AI over the year, they were prompting and they're like, no, like it's not right. It's not accurate. Like it's giving us the wrong information. Reprompt. Then finally they're like, this is where it needs to be. This is what we need to produce in our class. This is what we need to create. And this is what it's actually producing for us. And they went back and forth with it in order to actually get it right. And they were using AI not to cheat. They were using it to like amplify their own understanding of things and create a better product than they would have if they just had kind of like, the old manual way of kind of doing things at their time. And I think as an educator, kind of connecting to Kat's point here of like, being workforce ready, that's extremely powerful. Our employers want our students to learn more while they're in our programs so they can be more effective, and they have to train them less on these different technical things when they get there on the spot. And I think, especially those of us in the kind of the technical space of things where, AI tends to be a little bit more reliable. This is something that every teacher should be looking at how to incorporate in their toolbox, because ultimately it does benefit students when incorporated properly.
So the mind shift here might be like, instead of asking, how do we stop students from using AI? Maybe the real question is, how do we teach them to use it well? Really interesting conversation. I want to shift back to this hope theory that Kat was talking about. And I've heard all of you use that word hope in a lot of our conversations. So how does that matter to what we're talking about here? Kat, why don't you tell us more about the hope theory?
Basically, it is the basis of if you can measure where somebody is in life and their level of hope, it tells you where you can start engaging them. And it helps you gauge work readiness, their ability to live on their own, their ability to recover from trauma, their ability to overcome, substance use disorders. Like if you can measure and get a baseline of where somebody is in their space of hope and do things to increase it, you elevate the entire person. And so if we can start using this tool in so many spaces, and I think of every job that I call heavy peopling or heavy humaning, right? When you have that interaction that is part of that role that makes it meaningful. Healthcare, education, face-to-face customer service, like all the spaces where you have to engage with people. If you can bring hope not just to the person doing the role, and hope looks very different. Hope can be like, I wake up in the morning and say, I hope I can get all this stuff I have to do today done, right? I get that done, and that leaves me more time for myself, my personal care. That leaves me more time to spend with my children and impact them and have meaningful time with them. Again, educators have more time with their students. Nurses and doctors have more time with patients to have meaningful conversations, so they're not just feeling like next, because, in spaces, especially where humaning is overwhelming and there's a lot of folks to serve. If I would have had this tool as a case manager 9 years ago, serving 90 participants, low-income dislocated workers, to do the case noting, the scheduling, the, summary notes, and even presentations, I would have had more time to help folks, which elevates my hope. But what does that do as far as the impact to the person on the receiving end? That's magic. That elevates folks' hope. So a lot of folks go like, Kat, warm, fuzzy, feely, but it's the basis of, if you want a really great employee, think about one that comes to work feeling hopeful versus one that feels overwhelmed. And as far as the workforce, think about that. And then we're all people. We all have lives and homes, and a lot of us got kids. Where does this elevate the quality of those spaces? And so that is my podium on hope when it comes to this. And when it comes to fear, I think of that, it's pretty much the opposite. And if we can look at how we use this tool, not just in elevating us in our workspaces, but how we life better. How do I make a chore chart faster? How do I schedule all the pickups? Because I have 3 different children in 3 different high schools doing 14 different activities after school, and I can have something schedule that so I know when and where I need to be. It's just, there's not a space where it doesn't apply. And I think that if we stop thinking it as something fearful and start thinking of how can it enhance me as a human, how can it enhance my quality of life, it brings more curiosity and more willingness for folks to consider it, adopt it, learn how to use it.
We've spent, I think people are spending a lot of time, thinking about how they can use AI to do what they're already doing. And I think not enough time thinking about what they could be doing differently and what more they could be doing with it and imagining a different future. That's what I hope for. A much different future than we have right now.
Yeah, every student that kind of comes into a training program, whether it's a small afternoon seminar or a 10-week quarter semester, whatever it may be, has hope. They want to learn something. They want to be something different when they kind of get out of that experience. That's kind of why we sign up for it. And I think, as a human species, we're great learners. We're wonderful at creating. Go for a walk outside, look at architecture, landscaping, automobiles, art. That's just kind of like how we operate and what we do well. It kind of sets us apart from the pack of the other like critters on the planet. And I think that this is a very, very valuable tool because it can actually tap into that creative element and bring that hope forward as well for students. And if they do want to learn, if they do want to create, if they got the goals of being an engineer or a computer scientist or a famous artist, this tool, when actually instructed properly, so once again, instructed properly, can actually propel that forward. And kind of the inverse, like where I see some programs in academia going with like, actually giving money to buy tools to detect this stuff is not helping students. That's actually moving in a direction of fear. I mean, you're spending good hard cash that you should be spending IMO supporting your instructors to create, to actually kind of police this technology on the behalf of instructors that don't understand the technology, to students who are trying to navigate this new technology that they hear from employers they need to understand in order to be successful when they're actually hired. And that's creating a culture of fear and uncertainty to these students. That's not the way. I think, if an organization or institution is looking at like how to adopt this and you have a budget for it, don't be looking at like some sort of automated tool. Invest in your people, invest in your humans, in order to actually use this technology better, because you'll get a much bigger return on your investment. And it's where we kind of need to start going. Find your champions at your organizations, people are more excited about it, have some wins under their belt, and also find where those real pitfalls are, because there's a lot of hype, uncertainty, and misinformation around these different tools, as well as some real world things that can go pretty south with AI, which is where the ethical aspect of it kind of comes in. And I can't think of a better place to learn about how to use this technology for personal growth, for professional development, than kind of higher ed and just the world of online training. So I think that as we're learning these tools, there's some really great stuff out there, and you can learn a lot on your own through the AI tool, but tapping into this technology to kind of go above and beyond where you are does bring hope. I mean, everyone here on this panel has been using AI to kind of get our own businesses off the ground, which is a dream. And the things that I've personally used AI to understand to kind of get me into this space is so vast. I couldn't even start to list them out in this podcast. But it got us all here, and I think our story and what we're telling here in this segment too should be hope for other people that are looking at like, can I build something? Can I create something? What can I do with where I'm at now and kind of go to where my vision is? And I think there's a lot of opportunity in this period of time.
It's so interesting to frame the great AI debate as sort of a dichotomy between fear and hope. I really like that framing. Okay, so what a great discussion this has been. Before we wrap, let's do one quick round of what's one thing you hope people will take away from this conversation. I'll go first. So, human better isn't just about keeping up with technology. It's about remembering why we learn in the first place. I'm going to kick it over to Tara.
There is, a lot of fear around AI tools, and I don't think that does anybody any good to ignore that. But if we can look at the potential of what we can do with them, maybe then we'll find that hope for a better future.
Nice. Kat, what do you think?
Curiosity drives transformation. And when we start transforming how we look at the world, how we look at how we do our jobs, how we look at how we human better, I think that I would love folks to be curious as to what this tool can do for them for the betterment of their own lives, and also to help elevate their hope and those that they serve.
Thanks, Kat. And Dennis, bring us home.
All right. Well, first off, I kind of also want to clarify that I feel like that this cautious nature about adopting AI and giving it a very critical lens is extremely healthy right now, and I'm very thankful to be seeing that like all across the spectrum. Yes, I'm excited about this. I'm a technology enthusiast. But, there is a lot of ways that this can kind of go sideways, how this tool can actually go south. And, as we've been using the internet now, so I would say it's like maybe 2000, like since 2000, for 25 years, we've been using technology across the spectrum with like broadband to kind of learn and build our different products and new businesses and so forth. And a lot of things created that are on the internet today aren't necessarily healthy for our own information consumption. There's a lot of disinformation out there. There's a lot of misinformation around there. And a lot of products that we use for social media may not have our best interests in mind around privacy or our personal well-being. So my kind of like call is, if you are critical about AI, great, just kind of scratch the surface of it, give it a try, kind of look at the benefits as well as the risk, but then also circle back to what products are you currently using, and, are those good products as well? Do they have your best interest in mind around these different areas, and kind of like do this little self-reflection on what technology do we actually want in our lives? What products do we want on a screen in front of our children while they're unattended? What are we actually bringing into our lives to bring hope and also make us better, and what's just a distraction? So I think as this technology is kind of coming into play, we can take a little bit of like a pause and like, all right, like let's look at this holistically, and what are we using? What are we choosing? What are we going to spend $9.95 a month on? To actually make our lives better, easier, more efficient, or meet our goals. And AI, I think, is a great way to start bringing that conversation on one new technology, but it opens up the topic that we're discussing today. We can talk about that with just about anything. And I'm really excited about having these difficult conversations around this technology and how to implement it best for humans.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a nuanced conversation. I appreciate you calling out. This isn't like kind of a black and white thing. There's a lot we have to figure out, and there's a lot we're learning as we go. Well, I think that's the perfect note to end on. This was the premiere episode of SkarrCast. Next time, our students take over, showing us what happens when you flip that pyramid model and put learning into action. So subscribe, join us on Substack, send us the questions you want us to tackle next. So final word, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Kat, for coming out today. And I'll just kind of end this with, the future of learning isn't about repeating what's been written. It's about preparing people to write what comes next. And I hope that you'll tune in to us for our next show, and you get to see the stories that our students are beginning to write as they learn these different tools and teach us a little bit more about the value they find, as well as a little bit of the hesitation that they have. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. See you next time.